Welcome back to another journey through the shadows of Fazbear Entertainment. Tonight, we're stepping into the original location that started it all. The place where childhood wonder turned to midnight terror, where pizza and prizes gave way to surveillance cameras and locked doors. This is the story of Five Nights at Freddy's 1, the game that launched a phenomenon and introduced us to a world where animatronic entertainers became something far more sinister once the lights went down. Before we begin this deep exploration into every corner of that infamous pizzeria, I want you to get comfortable. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or simply letting this story wash over you like a gentle tide, we're going to take our time here. There's no rush. We'll walk through every detail, every implication, every shadow that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza casts across the larger narrative. This isn't just about jump scares and survival mechanics. This is about understanding how 1 week in November of 1993 represents the culmination of years of tragedy, how 5 murdered children found themselves trapped in mechanical bodies, and how 1 security guard stumbled into a nightmare that had been building for nearly a decade. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 was released in August 2014 by indie developer Scott Cawthon, and it changed the horror gaming landscape forever. What appeared to be a simple point-and-click survival game with creepy animatronics turned out to be so much more. Beneath the surface of this seemingly straightforward premise lay a deeply interconnected story of murder, possession, and revenge that would spawn dozens of games, books, and an entire universe of lore. But here, in this first game, we find something pure in its terror. We find a story that's both complete and tantalizingly incomplete, giving us just enough to understand the horror while leaving mysteries that would take years to unravel. The game places you in the worn office of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a family entertainment center that has clearly seen better days. Through grainy security camera feeds, you watch as 4 animatronic performers, characters designed to delight children during birthday parties and weekend visits, begin to move through the darkened building with purpose and malice. Your only tools for survival are 2 heavy metal doors, lights to check the blind spots just outside your office, and a limited power supply that ticks down with each passing second. It's simple. It's terrifying. And every element of that gameplay tells a story about what happened in this place, about why these machines move the way they do, and about the innocent souls trapped within their metal frames. But to truly understand Five Nights at Freddy's 1, we need to start long before Mike Schmidt ever sat down in that office chair. We need to go back to the beginning, to a partnership between 2 men who dreamed of bringing joy to children through innovative entertainment technology. We need to understand how those dreams curdled into something dark, how ambition and jealousy transformed a simple family diner into a hunting ground, and how the consequences of those early tragedies would echo through the decades, eventually manifesting in the haunted halls that Mike Schmidt would be hired to guard. The year is 1993, but our story begins much earlier, in the optimism of the early 1980s, or possibly the late 1970s, when Fredbear's Family Diner first opened its doors. The founding years, where dreams became nightmares. Based on what the games and supplementary materials reveal, 2 men with complementary skills and shared vision came together to create something new in the world of family entertainment. Henry Emily, an engineering genius with a gift for creating lifelike animatronic characters, partnered with William Afton, a businessman with the charisma and drive to turn their creations into a successful venture. Together, they founded Fredbear's Family Diner, a modest restaurant that would serve as the testing ground for their innovative spring lock technology. The spring lock suits were a remarkable innovation, a solution to a practical problem in family entertainment. The question they answered was simple. How could they create animatronic characters that could perform autonomously when needed, but also be worn by employees for more intimate interactions with customers? The answer lay in a complex system of spring-loaded mechanisms that could compress the animatronic components, creating space for a human wearer. When the springs were tightly wound and locked into place, a person could climb inside the suit safely. When released, the endoskeleton would expand, and the suit would function as a traditional animatronic. It was ingenious. It was innovative. It was also incredibly dangerous. Fredbear's Family Diner featured two main characters using this spring lock technology. Fredbear himself, a friendly golden bear with a purple top hat and bow tie, served as the restaurant's mascot and main attraction. Spring Bonnie, a yellow rabbit with a permanent smile, complemented Fredbear as the secondary character. During operating hours, these suits could walk around, entertain children, and create an immersive experience that set Fredbear's apart from other family restaurants of the era. The diner became known for its unique approach, for the way children could interact with characters that seemed to bridge the gap between costume and robot, between performer and performance. Henry Emily threw himself into perfecting the technology, always thinking of new ways to improve the experience, to make the animatronics more responsive, more lifelike, more engaging for the children who visited. He had a daughter, Charlotte, whom he adored. And based on what later games reveal, much of his motivation came from wanting to create a place where children like her could experience wonder and magic. Henry represented the pure heart of Fazbear Entertainment, the genuine desire to bring joy through innovation and creativity. William Afton, on the other hand, brought different qualities to the partnership. He handled the business side, the marketing, the expansion plans, the day-to-day operations that Henry had little interest in managing. Where Henry was gentle and thoughtful, William presented himself as charismatic and ambitious. He could work a room, charm investors, and project an image of success and stability. To the outside world, William Afton appeared to be a devoted family man and successful entrepreneur. He had 3 children of his own, an older son named Michael, a younger son who would come to be known in the community as the crying child, and a daughter named Elizabeth. But beneath William's polished exterior, something darker lurked. The exact nature of his motivations remains one of the franchise's enduring mysteries. But what we know from the game suggests that resentment and obsession played significant roles in his transformation. Some theories propose he watched Henry's success with growing jealousy. Others suggest he was always psychologically disturbed, simply waiting for opportunity. What's certain is that William Afton would eventually become a serial killer, and his crimes would define the tragedy of Fazbear Entertainment. The spring lock technology, for all its innovation, carried inherent risks that became apparent over time. The springs were sensitive to moisture and sudden movements. If they became loose, or if water compromised their tension, they would snap back to their natural position with tremendous force, crushing whatever occupied the space where the animatronic components should be. We know from Phone Guy's training tapes in 5 Nights at Freddy's 3 that employees were trained extensively on how to use the suits safely. They were told to wind the springs tightly before entering. They were warned never to breathe too heavily or make sudden movements while wearing the suits. They were instructed to keep the suits away from any moisture. Despite these precautions, the danger was always present, hovering in the background of every performance, every employee interaction with the spring lock technology. But the suits were too central to the Fredbear's experience to abandon. They were what made the diner special, what set it apart from competitors. So the training continued, the warnings were repeated, and everyone hoped that careful adherence to protocols would be enough to prevent tragedy. Fredbear's Family Diner appears to have thrived through its early years. The concept proved popular enough that Henry and William began planning an expansion. They envisioned a chain of locations, each featuring their animatronic technology, each bringing their unique brand of entertainment to communities across the region. The first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opened, featuring a full band of animatronic performers. Freddy Fazbear, the titular bear who served as band leader, Bonnie, a purple rabbit with a guitar, Chica, a yellow chicken with a cupcake companion, and Foxy, a pirate fox who entertained from his own special area called Pirate Cove. These new animatronics used traditional robotics rather than spring-lock technology. They were safer, more reliable, and could perform complex routines with musical instruments and choreographed movements. But Fredbear's Family Diner, the original location, remained the foundation of their empire, the place where the spring-lock suits continued to delight customers with their unique versatility. It was during this period that the first cracks began to appear. William Afton's home life, based on what we pieced together from FNAF 4's minigames, showed signs of dysfunction. His younger son was terrified of the animatronics, requiring constant reassurance. His older son, Michael, had become a bully, tormenting his younger brother with cruel pranks involving foxy masks. The technology that was supposed to bring joy had created an environment of fear in William's household. What William didn't yet understand, what he couldn't have predicted, was that his descent into darkness would trigger a cascade of events that would haunt Fazbear Entertainment for decades. The tragedies were about to begin, and 1983 would mark the turning point, from which there would be no return. The Bite of 83 and the first murder. The year 1983 marked the beginning of the end for Fredbear's Family Diner and the innocence it represented. Two separate tragedies would unfold that year, though the exact chronological order between them remains a subject of debate in the community. These events were connected by a single thread: William Afton's involvement and the terrible toll his actions would extract from those around him. William's younger son, known to the community as the Crying Child, lived in a state of constant fear. The animatronics that delighted other children filled him with terror. He saw them not as friendly entertainers, but as threats with sharp teeth and lifeless eyes. His older brother, Michael, recognized this fear and exploited it mercilessly. Michael would don a foxy mask, the pirate character's grinning face twisted into something sinister through the lens of childhood cruelty, and leap out from closets or around corners to startle his younger sibling. These weren't isolated incidents of sibling rivalry. Michael had friends who participated in the bullying, other teenagers who found amusement in tormenting a frightened child. Based on what we see in FNAF 4's minigames, they would corner him at Fredbear's Family Diner, wearing masks of Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica, surrounding him with the very images that haunted his nightmares. The Crying Child would cry out for someone to help him, but no intervention came. There's evidence in FNAF 4 that suggests the Fredbear plush the Crying Child carried may have been more than a simple toy. Some theorize it could have contained surveillance equipment, allowing someone, possibly William, to monitor and communicate with his son. The plush speaks to the child throughout the minigames, offering cryptic warnings and promises. Whether this represents William's manipulation, the supernatural influence of Charlotte's spirit, or something else entirely remains open to interpretation, but it adds another layer to the psychological horror the child experienced. The crying child's birthday party was held at Fredbear's family diner. It should have been a day of celebration, of cake and presents, and the attention that a birthday child deserves. Instead, it became the site of one of the most notorious incidents in Fazbear Entertainment's history. Michael and his friends, emboldened by their previous cruelty, and perhaps caught up in a mob mentality, decided to play one final terrible prank. They found the crying child hiding, trying to make himself invisible. Michael and his friends grabbed him, lifting him despite his screams and struggles. They carried him toward the stage where Fredbear was performing. The crying child fought against them, his terror absolute, his pleas desperate. But they reached the stage. They lifted him higher, holding him in front of Fredbear's face, chanting for the animatronic to give him a big kiss. What happened next has become known as the Bite of 83. The crying child's head was positioned near or inside Fredbear's mouth. Something triggered the animatronic's jaw mechanism, whether from the child's tears providing moisture to the spring locks, from mechanical failure, or from the forced positioning. Fredbear's jaw clamped down on the child's head with devastating force. The bite was catastrophic. The party erupted into chaos. The child was rushed to the hospital with severe head trauma. According to what FNAF 4 shows us, the crying child lingered in a coma, surrounded by plush toys and medical equipment. Michael, finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd done, visited and apologized, his words captured in the game's dialogue. The Fredbear plush offered a cryptic promise: "I will put you back together." On what the game represents as the sixth night, the heart monitor flatlined. The crying child died from his injuries. The copyright date visible in the minigames confirms the year 1983. Around this same period, another tragedy struck, this one targeting Henry Emily's family directly. Charlotte Emily, Henry's young daughter, was murdered. The details we can piece together from FNAF 2's minigames and later games suggest she was killed outside one of the Fazbear Entertainment locations, possibly locked out during an event and left vulnerable. William Afton, based on what the games reveal, was responsible for Charlotte's murder. This appears to have been his first killing of a child, the beginning of his career as a serial murderer. The exact motivation remains unclear, whether driven by jealousy of Henry's family life, by some darker compulsion, or by a combination of factors. William ended Charlotte's life in an act that would have far-reaching consequences. The restaurant security puppet, known as the marionette, or simply the puppet, played a crucial role in what happened next. Henry had created this animatronic specifically to watch over Charlotte, linking it to a special bracelet she wore. When Charlotte found herself outside and in danger, the puppet attempted to reach her, but it was too late. By the time the puppet reached the alley where Charlotte lay, she was already dead. What happened in that moment is central to understanding the supernatural elements of Five Nights at Freddy's. Charlotte's spirit, based on what we can infer from the games, somehow merged with the puppet. Her death wasn't simply an ending, but a transformation. The puppet awakened with awareness, with memories, with a protective instinct toward other children that would manifest throughout the franchise. Charlotte, now one with the puppet, would remember what happened to her, and she would dedicate her new existence to helping other murdered children find a form of continued existence. Henry Emily never recovered from Charlotte's murder. The investigation went nowhere. No suspects were arrested. Henry would eventually withdraw from active involvement in Fazbear Entertainment, leaving William Afton with increasing control over the company they had built together. The immediate aftermath of the bite of '83 also sent shockwaves through the business. Fredbear's family diner was closed, whether temporarily or permanently, depending on which timeline interpretation you follow. The spring lock technology was deemed too dangerous for continued use with employees in direct contact with customers. The original Fredbear and Spring Bonnie suits were moved to back rooms and safe rooms at Freddy Fazbear's pizza locations, designated as backup equipment, but effectively retired from active service. These twin tragedies of 1983 set the stage for everything that would follow. William had committed murder and, based on what the games suggest, discovered something that fascinated him: proof that consciousness could persist beyond death, tied to the very machines he and Henry had created. Charlotte's possession of the puppet demonstrated that under certain traumatic circumstances, a spirit could bind itself to an animatronic. This discovery would fuel William's future crimes and his obsessive pursuit of what later games would reveal he called remnant, the essence of life itself trapped in haunted metal. 2 years after these events, in June of 1985, William Afton would commit the crimes that would lead directly to the haunted animatronics Mike Schmidt faces in Five Nights at Freddy's 1. The Missing Children Incident. 5 souls trapped. On June 26, 1985, at a Freddy Fazbear's pizza location, William Afton committed the murders that would create the haunted animatronics of Five Nights at Freddy's 1. This event, known as the Missing Children Incident, represents the heart of the first game's backstory. Everything that happens during Mike Schmidt's week, every movement of the animatronics, every close call, traces back to this single day when 5 children lost their lives. The date of June 26, 1985, is supported by evidence from the Into the Pit story and game, which depicts the incident taking place in that year, as well as the original novel trilogy, which places similar events in 1985. This timeline fits with the newspaper clippings in FNAF 1 that reference 20 years of animatronic operation, and places the incident before the 1987 events depicted in FNAF 2. The party that day may have been for a child named Gabriel, based on evidence from later games that reveals the names of the murdered children. Among those present were Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, and Cassidy. These 5 children, whose names would later be confirmed through gravestone Easter eggs in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator and other clues throughout the series, had no way of knowing this would be the last day of their lives. William Afton arrived at the location wearing one of the retired Springlock suits, specifically the Spring Bonnie costume that had been moved from Fredbear's after the 1983 closure. The bright yellow rabbit suit, with its friendly, frozen smile, served as the perfect disguise, allowing William to move among the children without suspicion, to separate them from their parents and lead them to their deaths. Phone Guy's Night 6 call in Five Nights at Freddy's 2 confirms this method. Someone used one of the suits. We had a spare in the back, a yellow one. Someone used it. This detail, delivered years before the full picture became clear, was one of the earliest confirmations that the murders were committed by someone in a Springlock suit. William used the Spring Bonnie costume to gain the children's trust. To them, he wasn't a stranger. He was a familiar character from the restaurant, a friendly face inviting them to see something special. One by one, William lured them to the safe room. Safe rooms existed in every Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location. We learn about them from Phone Guy's training tapes in FNAF 3. Every location is built with one extra room that is not included in the digital map layout programmed in the animatronics or the security cameras. This room is reserved for equipment and/or other purposes that are not relevant to the general operation of the restaurant. These blind spots in the building's surveillance were perfect for William's purposes. Evidence from the Fruity Maze minigame in FNAF 6 suggests that Susie may have been lured by William with a lie about her recently deceased pet dog. He told her the dog was still alive, that he could take her to see it. For a grieving child, the lie was enough. Spring Bonnie led her to the safe room, and there, William murdered her. The other children, Gabriel, Jeremy, Fritz, and Cassidy, met similar fates. The exact sequence isn't documented, but the result was the same. 5 children murdered in the safe room of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. William's method of concealing the bodies was as horrific as the murders themselves. He stuffed each child's corpse into the animatronic suits. Based on what later games confirm, Gabriel was placed inside Freddy Fazbear. Jeremy went into Bonnie. Susie's body was hidden inside Chica. Fritz was stuffed into Foxy. And Cassidy, the 5th child, was placed into a golden Freddy suit, a withered version of Fredbear that had been damaged and retired. Whether William intended to trigger possession or was simply hiding evidence remains ambiguous. He had witnessed Charlotte's transformation into the puppet. He knew that spirits could bind to animatronics under traumatic circumstances. Whatever his reasoning, the children would not rest quietly. The puppet, still possessed by Charlotte's spirit, appears to have witnessed or become aware of what happened during the missing children incident. In the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame from FNAF 2, the puppet is shown approaching each of the murdered children, placing masks on their faces, the masks of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy. The 5th child, who would possess Golden Freddy, is shown separately, their possession potentially occurring differently from the others. Charlotte, through the puppet, facilitated the children's possession of the animatronic suits. She gave gifts, gave life to the victims, ensuring they would have a form of existence beyond death, even if that existence was a horrifying mockery of life, trapped in metal and wiring with only fragments of their memories and personalities remaining. The children's spirits, now bound to the animatronics, awakened confused and angry. They retained enough awareness to know they had been murdered, to understand that something terrible had happened, but their memories were fragmentary. They couldn't clearly recall who had killed them. They couldn't fully grasp what they had become. What they did understand was that they were something other than human now, something mechanical and powerful, and that awareness manifested as hostility toward adults who entered the restaurant after hours. The official investigation into the missing children incident went nowhere. Parents reported their children missing. Police searched the restaurant extensively. The newspaper clippings in FNAF 1 tell us that a suspect was caught on a surveillance camera and 2 local children were reportedly lured into a back room, but that the suspect was convicted and released after the bodies were never found. The children's corpses, hidden inside the animatronics, were never discovered during the investigation. The cases went cold, but the animatronics that housed the children's bodies were not destroyed. They were moved, recycled, maintained as the company struggled to continue operations despite their tarnished reputation. The suits began to develop problems that concerned parents and staff. The newspaper clippings described the mascots as having a particularly foul odor and what appeared to be blood and mucus around the eyes and mouths, which concerned parents interpreted as reanimated carcasses. Phone Guy's Night 1 message in FNAF 1 provides context for this. The animatronics haven't been cleaned in their 20-plus years of service. This poor maintenance, combined with the decomposing bodies hidden inside, created the disturbing appearance that would contribute to the restaurant's declining reputation. The animatronics were also left in a free-roaming mode at night, officially to prevent their servos from locking up due to lack of movement. Phone Guy explains this on Night 1. They're left in some kind of free-roaming mode at night. Something about their servos locking up if they get turned off for too long. This technical justification masked the reality that the possessed animatronics were no longer fully controlled by their programming. They moved at night because the spirits inside them willed it. By 1993, when Mike Schmidt would be hired as the night guard at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, these 5 children would have been haunting the animatronics for 8 years. Gabriel in Freddy, Jeremy in Bonnie, Susie in Chica, Fritz in Foxy, and Cassidy in Golden Freddy, all trapped in the dark, all searching for something they couldn't quite remember, all ready to attack anyone who resembled the figure who had led them to their deaths. The missing children incident created the threat that defines Five Nights at Freddy's 1. Every night Mike Schmidt survives is a night he avoids the fate of those who came before. Every movement the animatronics make is driven by these murdered children's confusion and rage. Every jump scare represents the spirit's attempt to stuff another adult into a suit, perpetuating a cycle of violence they don't fully understand. The animatronics, vessels of trapped souls. To understand Five Nights at Freddy's 1, you need to understand the animatronics not just as mechanical threats, but as characters with their own tragic circumstances. Each of the 4 main animatronics, plus the mysterious Golden Freddy, houses the spirit of a murdered child. And their behaviors during Mike Schmidt's week reflect both the nature of their possession and the confused, aggressive state that defines their nightly activity. Freddy Fazbear, the namesake character of the restaurant and the leader of the animatronic band, is possessed by Gabriel. Freddy appears as a brown bear wearing a black top hat and bow tie, holding a microphone that he would use during performances. His design is friendly and approachable, meant to be the comforting face of the franchise, the character children would trust and parents would associate with wholesome entertainment. But Gabriel's spirit has transformed Freddy into something else during the night hours. Of all the animatronics in the first game, Freddy demonstrates the most methodical hunting behavior. He doesn't rush to the office like Bonnie or Chica. Instead, he moves through a specific path, from the show stage through the dining area, taking his time, building tension with each position change. His glowing eyes appear in the darkness of the cameras as warnings of his approach. When the power runs out and the lights go dark, Freddy's musical jingle, a slowed-down version of the Toreador March from Carmen, plays before his attack. This behavior pattern could suggest that whatever remains of Gabriel's personality manifests as patience and deliberation, or it could simply be how possession has affected Freddy's particular circuitry. The game doesn't explain why each animatronic behaves differently, leaving room for interpretation about how much of the original child remains versus how much is corrupted instinct. Bonnie the Bunny, the guitarist of the Fazbear Band who appears purple-tinted due to the game's lighting, but is officially blue according to creator Scott Cawthon, is possessed by Jeremy. Bonnie approaches the office from the left side, using the West Hall as his primary hunting ground. He's typically the first animatronic to move during any given night, often leaving the show stage within the first hour. His behavior is more erratic than Freddy's, moving back and forth between locations rather than following a set path, making him unpredictable and requiring constant camera vigilance. Bonnie's aggressive, seemingly random movement pattern makes him one of the most frequent threats in the early nights. Phone Guy notes on night 1 that if the animatronics encounter someone after hours, they'll probably try to forcefully stuff you inside a Freddy Fazbear suit. This applies to all the possessed animatronics, their confusion about identity leading them to mistake the night guard for an endoskeleton that needs to be fixed by being placed in a costume. The psychological impact of Bonnie's appearances is significant. Many players report that Bonnie is the animatronic they find most disturbing, possibly because of how frequently he appears at the door, possibly because of his design with the eyebrowless face that creates an unsettling expression. Whether this relates to Jeremy's spirit or simply to the game's design choices is left to interpretation. Chica the chicken, the yellow bird with her cupcake companion, is possessed by Susie. Based on what we learn in FNAF 6's Fruity Maze minigame, Susie was a young girl who had recently lost her pet dog when William Afton lured her with false promises. This backstory adds a layer of tragedy to Chica's presence in FNAF 1, transforming the cheerful pizza-loving mascot into something profoundly sad. Chica approaches the office from the right side, using the East Hall as her primary route. She's often seen in the kitchen, where sounds of pots and pans clattering indicate her presence, even though no camera covers that area. This behavior, lingering in the kitchen, might connect to Chica's role as the food-oriented character, but it also creates a strategic challenge for players who can only use audio cues to track her position. Chica is typically the second animatronic to become active, following Bonnie, but preceding Freddy. Her movements are more predictable than Bonnie's, but less methodical than Freddy's, creating a middle ground that requires attention without the same level of constant vigilance. When she appears at the right door, her face fills the window with that wide, unblinking stare, teeth visible in what was designed to be a welcoming smile but reads as something threatening in the dim light. Foxy the Pirate Fox operates differently from the other three animatronics, reflecting his unique position in the restaurant's layout. Housed in Pirate Cove behind a starry purple curtain, Foxy doesn't roam the building in the same way. Instead, he emerges in stages, his head peeking out, then his body leaning forward, before finally sprinting down the West Hall toward the office. Foxy is possessed by Fritz, though his behavior seems to operate on different rules than the others. Phone Guy mentions on night 2 that he's always been a bit twitchy and suggests keeping the camera on Pirate Cove periodically to keep Foxy in check. This creates a balancing act for players. Watch Foxy too infrequently and he'll attack, but watching him too much might mean missing Bonnie, Chica, or Freddy approaching from other directions. There's something particularly unsettling about Foxy's attack pattern. While other animatronics slowly approach the office, giving players time to react, Foxy runs. He sprints down the hallway at full speed, and if the left door isn't closed in time, his jump scare is immediate and unavoidable. This could suggest that whatever remains of Fritz is more aggressive than the others. Or it could simply be how Foxy's particular design translates the possession's effects into action. Golden Freddy is the anomaly, the mystery within the mystery. Unlike the other animatronics, Golden Freddy doesn't appear on cameras, doesn't approach through hallways, doesn't follow the rules that govern the others. He appears suddenly in the office when certain conditions are met, his slumped, eyeless form materializing out of nothing, and his jump scare crashes the game itself, as if his presence is too much for even the digital framework to contain. Golden Freddy is possessed by Cassidy, based on evidence from the survival logbook and other sources that would come later in the franchise. However, some theories suggest that Golden Freddy may house two spirits, Cassidy and potentially the crying child from the bite of 83. This two souls theory attempts to explain the particularly strange and powerful nature of Golden Freddy's abilities, suggesting that the combination of spirits creates something more supernatural than the other possessed animatronics. In FNAF 1, Golden Freddy appears when the player views a specific poster in the West Hall corner that randomly changes to show his face. Pulling down the camera after seeing this poster causes Golden Freddy to appear in the office. If the player doesn't immediately pull the camera back up, Golden Freddy attacks, and the game crashes to desktop. This unique behavior, crashing rather than showing a game over screen, has led to much speculation about Golden Freddy's nature and power. The 1987 Easter egg connected to Golden Freddy also hints at deeper lore. Setting the animatronics AI levels to 1 to 9, 8, 7 on custom night triggers an immediate Golden Freddy jump scare, crashing the game. Scott Cawthon has stated this was originally added to debunk rumors about a secret ending, but the connection between Golden Freddy and the year 1987, which would later be revealed as the setting for FNAF 2, suggested there was more to this character than initially appeared. All of these animatronics share a common purpose during the nights: hunting the security guard. They mistake adults for threats, possibly recognizing something about them that reminds them of their killer, possibly simply unable to distinguish between the living and the naked endoskeletons that Phone Guy claims they believe the night guard to be. Whatever the reason, they are relentless. From midnight to 6 a.m., they roam the building with deadly intent, and only the security doors and careful camera management keep them at bay. Mike Schmidt, the night guard's true identity. At the center of Five Nights at Freddy's 1 stands Mike Schmidt, the security guard whose perspective defines the entire gameplay experience. We never see Mike's face during normal gameplay, never hear his voice, never learn his thoughts directly. He exists as a pair of hands on the camera controls, a presence in the squeaking office chair, a name on the paycheck at the end of each completed week. But who is Mike Schmidt, and why does he keep coming back to this nightmare job? The surface level answer is simple. Mike is a security guard working the night shift at a failing family restaurant. His paycheck at the end of night 5 shows he's earning $120 for the entire week, working for around minimum wage. Based on wage calculations and calendar alignment, where November 12th falls on the appropriate day, most analysis places the game in 1993, though some theorists argue for 1992. The year on the check is deliberately obscured, showing only 11/12 Agakeks, leaving the exact date somewhat ambiguous. But the deeper answer, one that wouldn't become clear until later games in the franchise, is that Mike Schmidt may be an alias. Evidence from the survival logbook, a canonical tie-in book released years after FNAF 1, strongly suggests that Mike Schmidt is actually Michael Afton, the older son of William Afton, the very man who committed the murders that haunt Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This theory, now widely accepted in the community, recontextualizes everything about Mike's employment. If Mike is Michael Afton, then his presence at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza isn't random. He's not just a desperate worker taking a dangerous job for minimum wage. He's there with purpose, investigating his father's crimes, perhaps seeking to understand what happened to the children his father murdered, possibly trying to find evidence or achieve some form of redemption for his family's sins. The survival logbook provides several pieces of evidence supporting this identification. Mike's handwriting in the book matches responses that suggest knowledge of the Afton family history. He draws images of Nightmare Fredbear, the character from FNAF 4 that tormented the crying child, suggesting a personal connection to those events. The book's hidden messages and codes point towards someone with intimate knowledge of Fazbear Entertainment's darkest secrets. If Mike is Michael, then his motivation for returning night after night despite the danger makes more sense. He's not there for the paycheck. He's there because his brother died in the bite of 83, because his father murdered children and transformed them into vengeful spirits, because he carries guilt for his own role in the family's tragedies. His persistence through 5 nights, then returning for night 6, and even the custom night, reflects not desperation, but determination. The ending of Mike's employment also takes on new meaning under this theory. After completing his week, Mike is fired for tampering with the animatronics and odor, according to the pink slip shown after night 7. The tampering charge could relate to the custom night gameplay, where players adjust the animatronics' AI levels, but the odor complaint is more mysterious. Later games would reveal that Michael Afton's body underwent changes that left him in a state of decay, which could explain this seemingly random termination reason. Whether or not you accept the Mike is Michael theory, Mike Schmidt's role in FNAF 1 remains crucial. He represents the player's perspective, the ordinary person thrust into an extraordinary nightmare. Through his eyes, we experience the full horror of what William Afton's crimes created. Through his survival, we learn that the animatronics can be managed, can be endured, that there's a way through the darkness even when it seems overwhelming. Mike's interactions are limited to checking cameras, closing doors, and surviving until 6 a.m. He doesn't speak, doesn't fight back, doesn't try to investigate the murders or free the spirits. He simply endures. And in that endurance, there's something profound about the human spirit's ability to face horror and persist. Night after night, Mike returns to that office, knowing what waits for him in the dark, and he survives. The ending of FNAF 1, whether the standard Night 5 completion or the extended Night 6 and 7 experiences, doesn't provide closure for Mike Schmidt. We don't know what happens to him after he's fired, don't know if he continues his investigation, don't know if he ever achieves the redemption or understanding he might have been seeking. That story would continue in later games, but in FNAF 1, Mike's journey ends with a pink slip and unanswered questions. Phone Guy, the voice in the dark one. Of the most distinctive elements of Five Nights at Freddy's 1 is Phone Guy, the unseen predecessor whose recorded messages guide Mike Schmidt through his first nights on the job. Phone Guy, voiced by game creator Scott Cawthon himself, provides crucial gameplay information, while simultaneously deepening the lore and creating one of the game's most memorable moments of horror. Phone Guy's real name was eventually revealed to be Ralph in the Week Before novel, though for most of the franchise's history, he was known simply by his role. He worked at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza before Mike Schmidt, recording messages intended to help future night guards survive their shifts. His tone throughout these recordings is remarkably casual given the circumstances, a deliberate choice that creates disturbing cognitive dissonance between what he's describing and how he describes it. On night 1, Phone Guy introduces himself and the basic premise of the job. "Hello, hello," he begins, establishing his characteristic greeting. He reads the company's legal disclaimer, a darkly humorous passage about damage to property or person, and how a missing person report will be filed within 90 days, or as soon as property and premises have been thoroughly cleaned and bleached. He then explains the animatronics' behavior, describing how they're left in free roaming mode at night, and how they might see the night guard as an endoskeleton that needs to be stuffed into a suit. This night 1 message is remarkable for what it reveals and what it hides. Phone Guy presents the animatronics' attempts to stuff people into suits as a programming quirk, not as evidence of supernatural possession. He mentions the Bite of 87, one of the most analyzed lines in gaming history, noting that the human body can live without the frontal lobe. He's matter-of-fact about the mortal danger, as if describing workplace hazards at any other job. Night 2's message offers more specific advice about dealing with each animatronic. Phone Guy notes that Foxy always seemed twitchy and recommends periodically checking Pirate Cove. He describes how the animatronics become more active as the week progresses, preparing Mike for increasing difficulty. Throughout, his tone remains helpful and almost cheerful, as if he genuinely believes his advice will be enough to keep the new guard safe. Night 3 continues the tutorial aspects, while Phone Guy's warnings become slightly more urgent. He acknowledges that things are getting harder, but maintains his optimistic framing. The dissonance between his casual tone and the content of his warnings creates an unsettling effect, like someone describing a war zone while talking about the weather. Night 4 is where Phone Guy's story takes its terrible turn. His message that night is different from the others. He's not recording a premeditated tutorial anymore. He's recording in real time, during his own shift, and things are going badly. "Hello, hello," he begins as always, but his voice is strained. Hey, wow, day 4. I knew you could do it." Banging sounds are heard in the background. It's been a bad night here for me. I'm kinda glad that I recorded my messages for you when I did." More banging. He asked Mike to do him a favor. "Maybe sometime, you could check inside those suits in the back room." The message continues with increasing desperation. Phone Guy mentions wondering what's in all those empty heads back there, a reference to the spare animatronic parts and possibly the bodies hidden within. Then comes the sound that haunts players, the groaning of the animatronics, the chiming of Freddy's signature music box tune, and a scream followed by static. Phone Guy dies during Night 4's recording. We hear it happen. The implication is clear. He was attacked by the animatronics, stuffed into a suit, killed in the same way he warned Mike about. His cheerful instructions become his epitaph, his attempts to help future guards cut short by the very threat he described. Night 5's phone call is different entirely. Instead of Phone Guy's voice, we hear a garbled, distorted audio clip. When reversed and processed, this clip has been identified as an excerpt from Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, though the relevance of this particular text remains debated. The practical effect is clear. Phone Guy is gone, and Mike must face the final night alone. Phone Guy's death serves multiple narrative purposes. It demonstrates that the threat is real, that people die in this job, that Mike's survival isn't guaranteed. It creates emotional investment in a character we never see, someone who tried to help and paid the ultimate price. And it removes the tutorial guide for the final stretch, forcing players to rely on what they've learned and face the culmination of the week's terror without assistance. The question of what happened to Phone Guy's body adds another layer of horror. His request to check inside those suits suggests he knew or suspected what happened to the murdered children, that the bodies were hidden in the animatronics. Now, Phone Guy himself has presumably been stuffed into a suit, his remains joining the decomposing evidence of William Afton's crimes. Phone Guy's role expands in later games, with recordings appearing in FNAF 2 and FNAF 3, but his FNAF 1 presence remains iconic. He represents the ordinary worker trying to make the best of a terrible situation, offering guidance while ultimately powerless against the supernatural forces at play. His death is one of the franchise's defining moments, a reminder that in the world of Five Nights at Freddy's, good intentions aren't enough to survive. The gameplay as narrative. Mechanics that tell a story. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 uses its gameplay mechanics not just to create challenge, but to communicate its story. Every system, from power management to camera monitoring to the simple act of closing doors, carries meaning beyond its functional purpose. Understanding how the gameplay tells the story of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza enriches both the playing experience and the appreciation of Scott Cawthon's design philosophy. The most immediate mechanic is the power system. Mike Schmidt has limited electricity to last from midnight to 6 a.m., and every action drains that precious resource. Using cameras costs power. Checking the door lights costs power. Closing the doors costs significant power. If the power runs out before 6 a.m., the building goes dark, the doors open, and Freddy Fazbear approaches for one final encounter. This power limitation creates constant tension, but it also tells a story about Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This is a failing business, a restaurant that can barely keep its lights on, cutting costs in every possible way, including hiring minimum wage security guards for the death trap night shift. The limited power isn't just a game mechanic. It's a reflection of a company that has been declining since the murders and scandals of the mid-1980s. The security office itself communicates narrative through its design. It's cluttered, worn, clearly not designed for long-term occupation. A fan oscillates in the corner, creating white noise that might mask approaching footsteps. Children's drawings adorn the walls, remnants of happier times when this building was full of birthday parties and laughter. A poster of Freddy and his friends, cheerful and colourful, contrasts with the dark reality of what those characters have become. The camera system shows us the layout of the restaurant while reinforcing its atmosphere of decay. We see empty party rooms with scattered plates and chairs, a dining area where the lights barely penetrate the shadows, backstage areas where spare animatronic heads stare from shelves. Pirate Cove's curtain, marked "Sorry, out of order," hints at Foxy's troubled history. The kitchen camera, whose visual feed is broken, forces us to rely on audio to track Chica's movements, creating a blind spot that adds uncertainty. The animatronics' movement patterns tell stories of their own. They don't move randomly. They have routes, preferences, behaviors that suggest something like personality. Freddy's methodical progression contrasts with Bonnie's erratic wandering. Foxy's staged emergence, each pose more threatening than the last, creates a countdown to danger. Golden Freddy's supernatural appearance, triggered by a specific poster, breaks all the rules established by the other characters. The game's lack of weapons or offensive capabilities is crucial to its narrative effect. Mike Schmidt cannot fight back. He cannot destroy the animatronics, cannot flee the building, cannot call for help. His only options are avoidance and endurance. This powerlessness mirrors the trapped children's situation, turning every night into a reflection of the horror they experienced at William Afton's hands. The time display in the corner of the screen, showing the hour from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m., creates a different kind of tension. Each hour that passes without a game over represents survival, progress, hope. The knowledge that 6 a.m. will bring safety makes the final hours of each night excruciating, especially when power is low and animatronics are aggressive. This simple clock becomes a lifeline, a prayer, a countdown to dawn. The jump scares themselves, while often criticized as cheap horror, serve a narrative purpose. They represent the moment of failure, the instant when defense collapses and the animatronics achieve their goal. The screaming faces, the sudden violence, the immediate game over, all communicate the same message. This is what happens to people who don't survive. This is what happened to Phone Guy. This could happen to you. The Custom Night, unlocked after completing Night 5, offers a different kind of narrative through gameplay. Setting the animatronics AI levels allows players to experiment with different configurations, but it also suggests the instability of the possessed machines. Their aggression can be dialed up or down, implying that their behavior isn't purely supernatural, but also tied to their programming, a hybrid of mechanical and spiritual that defines the franchise's unique horror. Even the pause screen and its quit option tells a story. Mike Schmidt doesn't have to stay. He could quit at any time, abandon the job, never return to face another night, but he doesn't. Night after night, he comes back. Whether driven by financial desperation, obsessive determination, or something else entirely, Mike persists. The player's choice to continue mirrors his, creating a bond between player and protagonist through shared endurance. The newspaper clippings, hidden history, some of the most important lore in Five Nights at Freddy's 1 comes from sources that are easy to miss during normal gameplay. The newspaper clippings, which randomly replace the rules for safety poster in the East Hall corner, provide crucial backstory about the missing children incident and the decline of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. These clippings, viewable only when the camera is on the right location at the right time, piece together the history that created the haunted animatronics. The first clipping describes the initial report of the disappearances. Kids vanish at local pizzeria. Loss of 2 children due to suspected foul play. It establishes that children went missing, that foul play was suspected, and that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is the location. This clipping presents the public face of the tragedy, the sanitized news report that doesn't hint at the full horror of what occurred. The second clipping escalates the story. 5 children now reported missing, suspect convicted. It notes that a suspect dressed in a company mascot costume was caught on security camera and that police are currently pursuing several leads. This confirms the method William Afton used, disguising himself as an animatronic character to gain the children's trust, and indicates that an investigation was launched. The third clipping provides resolution of a sort. Suspect convicted but released due to lack of evidence. Bodies still not found. This explains why William Afton wasn't punished for his crimes. Without the bodies, without physical evidence, the suspect couldn't be definitively connected to murder. He was convicted of something, presumably child endangerment or related charges, but the murder charges couldn't stick. The children's corpses, hidden inside the animatronics, were never discovered. The fourth clipping addresses the pizzeria's decline. Local pizzeria on the verge of bankruptcy after series of unfortunate events. It mentions that health violations and the mascot costumes having blood and mucus around the eyes and mouths contributed to the restaurant's failing reputation. Parents described the smell as that of reanimated carcasses. This clipping connects the hidden bodies to the observable evidence that something was wrong, evidence that was explained away or ignored by company officials desperate to keep the business running. These newspaper clippings serve multiple narrative functions. They establish the backstory without requiring direct exposition. They create a sense of history, of events that happen before the game begins and continue to affect the present. They reward observant players with deeper lore while remaining optional for those who simply want to survive the nights. The clippings also raise questions that wouldn't be answered until later games. Who was the convicted suspect? Why wasn't he properly imprisoned? Where are the children's bodies? What does blood and mucus around the animatronics' faces mean? For players in 2014, these questions created a mystery to solve. For players now, with the benefit of years of additional lore, the clippings serve as confirmation of details that would be expanded in subsequent entries. The rules for safety poster that the clippings replace is itself significant. It lists rules for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Don't run, don't yell, don't scream, don't poop on the floor, stay close to mom, don't touch Freddy, don't hit, leave before dark. These rules, ostensibly for children visiting the restaurant, take on darker meaning in context. Leave before dark suggests awareness that nighttime brings danger. Don't touch Freddy hints at the animatronic's dangerous nature even during operating hours. The random appearance of these clippings reflects the nature of memory and trauma in the FNAF universe. They appear and disappear unpredictably, like fragments surfacing from a collective unconscious, like evidence that keeps trying to reveal itself despite efforts to suppress it. The building itself seems to want its story told, even as Fazbear Entertainment tries to bury its past. The office, where survival hangs by a thread. The security office in Five Nights at Freddy's 1 is more than a gameplay space. It's a character in itself, a reflection of both Freddy Fazbear's Pizza's decline and the desperate nature of the security guard's job. Every element of this cramped, cluttered room tells a story about the building it sits within and the nights that have been spent here. The office occupies a strange position in the restaurant's layout. It's not near the main entrance or the show stage. It's tucked away, accessible through two hallways, but offering no easy escape route. The only exits are the two doors that lead to West Hall and East Hall, the same doors that the animatronics use to approach. There's no back door, no window to climb through, no emergency exit. Once you're in the office, you're committed. You survive there or you don't. The desk is cluttered with equipment and personal items. The security tablet that controls the camera system sits prominently, its screen showing grainy feeds from around the building. A fan oscillates constantly, its hum providing white noise that might cover the sound of approaching footsteps. A cup, possibly of coffee, suggests long nights requiring caffeine to stay awake. A cupcake, similar to Chica's signature companion, adds a touch of surreal horror, a reminder that this was once a place designed for children's joy. The walls are decorated with children's drawings and a poster of Freddy's band. The drawings are colorful and innocent, depicting the animatronics as friendly characters. The kind of artwork that would be displayed proudly by a restaurant trying to project a family-friendly image. But in the context of the game, they become something else. They're reminders of the children who came here, some of whom never left, their spirits now trapped in the very characters they drew. The two doors are industrial and heavy, designed to seal completely when closed. They run on the same limited power supply as everything else, requiring constant management to use effectively. The door lights reveal small windows next to each entrance, and through those windows we can see whether Bonnie or Chica has arrived. But checking those lights costs power, as does keeping the doors closed. The balance between seeing the threat and dealing with it defines the core gameplay tension. The ceiling fan and the desk lamp provide minimal illumination. When the power runs out, even these fail, plunging the office into complete darkness. This is when Freddy makes his final approach, his glowing eyes visible in the dark, his music box tune playing its slowed-down melody. The darkness of the powerless office represents the ultimate vulnerability, the moment when all defenses have failed and survival depends entirely on luck and timing. The sounds of the office are as important as its visuals. The hum of electricity, the whir of the fan, the creak of the building settling, all create an ambient soundscape that can mask or highlight approaching threats. The animatronics make distinct sounds as they move, footsteps, breathing, the groaning that suggests their possessed state. Learning to distinguish these sounds becomes crucial in later nights, when camera management must be balanced against listening for immediate threats. There's something profoundly lonely about the office. It's designed for one person, isolated from any help, surrounded by threats. The previous occupant, phone guy, died here, or somewhere in this building. The job Mike Schmidt has taken is not just dangerous. It's designed to be disposable. The company doesn't care if their night guards survive. They barely pay enough to make the job worthwhile. The office reflects this corporate callousness, functional but uncomfortable, equipped for survival but not for safety. Golden Freddy, the fifth child, the anomaly, among all the animatronics in Five Nights at Freddy's 1, none is more mysterious than Golden Freddy. His rare appearances, his impossible behaviors, and his connection to the deeper lore of the franchise have made him one of the most analyzed and theorized characters in gaming history. Understanding Golden Freddy requires examining both what we know from the game itself and what later entries would reveal about his nature. Golden Freddy appears as a golden-colored version of Freddy Fazbear, slumped over as if deactivated or dead. His eyes are empty, black voids that occasionally show pinprick white dots. He holds a microphone similar to Freddy's, and his design includes the same hat and bow tie, but his coloring and conditions set him apart. He looks like Freddy's ghost, a spectral echo of the animatronic leader. Unlike the other animatronics, Golden Freddy doesn't appear on cameras. He doesn't walk through halls or peer through windows. His appearance is triggered by a specific condition: viewing a poster in the West Hall corner that randomly changes to show Golden Freddy's face, then pulling down the camera. When this happens, Golden Freddy appears in the office, his slumped form materializing from nowhere. If the player doesn't immediately pull the camera back up to dispel him, Golden Freddy attacks. But his jump scare is different from the others. Instead of the standard game over screen, Golden Freddy's attack crashes the game itself, forcing the player back to desktop. This unique behavior suggests something supernatural about Golden Freddy, something that exceeds the normal boundaries of the game's reality. The name Golden Freddy wasn't officially used until later games. In FNAF 1's files, he was listed as Yellow Bear. This behind-the-scenes detail has led to speculation about his identity. Is he Fredbear, the original spring lock animatronic from the diner? Is he a different character entirely? The golden coloring and certain design similarities suggest a connection to Fredbear, but the exact relationship remains open to interpretation. Later games would reveal that Golden Freddy is possessed by Cassidy, one of the 5 children murdered during the missing children incident. Cassidy's spirit, based on evidence from the survival logbook and other sources, is particularly vengeful and powerful. This could explain Golden Freddy's unique abilities, his capacity to appear without physical presence, to crash the game, to operate outside the rules that govern other animatronics. Some theories propose that Golden Freddy houses not 1, but 2 spirits, Cassidy and potentially the crying child from FNAF 4. This 2 souls interpretation attempts to explain Golden Freddy's exceptional power and the cryptic promise to put him back together that ends the crying child story. If both spirits reside within Golden Freddy, it would make him unique among the possessed animatronics, a vessel for double trauma and double rage. The 1987 Easter egg connects Golden Freddy to the broader FNAF timeline, setting the animatronics AI to 10987 on custom night, triggers an immediate Golden Freddy jump scare and game crash. While Scott Cawthon stated this was added to debunk rumors about secret endings, the connection between Golden Freddy and the year 1987, which FNAF 2 would reveal as the setting for its prequel events, suggests intentional lore significance. Golden Freddy's behavior in FNAF 1 established patterns that would recur throughout the franchise. His ability to appear and disappear at will, his connection to hidden triggers and secrets, his power that seems to exceed normal parameters, all would define his appearances in subsequent games. He represents the supernatural core of the FNAF universe, proof that these aren't just malfunctioning machines, but genuinely haunted entities with abilities that defy explanation. The phrase, "It's me," appears frequently when Golden Freddy is involved, sometimes in hallucinations, sometimes on walls, sometimes as a corruption of normal imagery. This message, whose meaning is never explicitly stated, seems to be a communication from the trapped spirit, an assertion of identity from a child who was murdered, hidden and forgotten. It's a declaration that refuses to let the world ignore what happened, an accusation that echoes through the building's corrupt atmosphere. What happens after FNAF 1? Five Nights at Freddy's 1 ends with Mike Schmidt's termination, his pink slip citing odor and tampering with the animatronics as reasons for his firing. But the story doesn't end there. What happens to Mike, to the animatronics, to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza? After the events of the game became the subject of sequels, prequels, and expanded lore that would develop over the following years, the most immediate consequence of FNAF 1's events is the closure of the restaurant. The newspaper clippings already indicated that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza was on the verge of bankruptcy, and phone guys mention that the place is set to close by year's end, confirms its imminent demise. The murders, the health violations, the declining reputation, all have taken their toll. After FNAF 1, this location appears to have closed permanently, but the animatronics that house the murdered children's spirits don't simply disappear. According to the timeline that would develop through subsequent games, the animatronics were put into storage or repurposed. The spirits remain trapped, their suffering continuing even as the building that hosted their deaths was shuttered. FNAF 3, which takes place 30 years after FNAF 1, reveals what ultimately happened to this era's story. A horror attraction called Fazbear's Fright is built to capitalize on the urban legends surrounding Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, The original animatronics are recovered and used as props. And in the ruins of the original location, something else is found. Springtrap, the spring-lock suit, containing the decayed corpse of William Afton himself. The backstory for how William ended up in the Springtrap suit connects directly to the events before FNAF 1. At some point after the missing children incident, William returned to the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza where the murders occurred. The spirits of the children, manifesting through the animatronics, confronted him. Cornered and desperate, William retreated to the safe room where he had committed his crimes and donned the Spring Bonnie suit as protection. But the old spring-lock mechanisms, compromised by moisture and time, failed catastrophically. The springs released, the animatronic components crushed into William's body, and he died in agony, trapped in the very suit he had used to commit murder. This death wasn't the end for William Afton. His spirit, bound to the Springtrap suit just as his victims were bound to theirs, persisted in a state of tortured undeath. He would become one of the franchise's recurring antagonists, his pursuit of immortality through remnant and possession, taking on new dimensions as his corrupted soul continued to influence events decades after his physical death. For Mike Schmidt, if he is indeed Michael Afton, the events of FNAF 1 would be just one chapter in a longer quest. Michael's journey through the FNAF franchise involves confronting his father's legacy at multiple locations, including the underground facility of Sister Location, where the Funtime animatronics reside. His goal, based on dialogue from later games, is to find his father and perhaps achieve some form of redemption or resolution for the family's crimes. The murdered children's spirits, trapped in the animatronics, would eventually find release through events depicted in FNAF 3's minigames. The Happiest Day minigame shows the children finally achieving peace, their masks removed, their spirits freed by the resolution of the story's conflicts. This ending, one of several possible conclusions across the franchise, suggests that the trapped souls can eventually move on, though the path to that peace is long and painful. FNAF 1 also established patterns that would recur throughout the franchise. The corporate callousness of Fazbear Entertainment, willing to cover up murders and endanger employees to protect their brand. The supernatural rules governing possession, how trauma binds spirits to objects, how those spirits behave once bound. The generational nature of the horror, sins of the past, creating present dangers, cycles of violence that perpetuate across decades. The game's ambiguous ending, with Mike fired but alive, with the restaurant closing, but the animatronics still haunted, with questions answered but mysteries remaining, created space for the expanded universe that would develop. Scott Cawthon built FNAF 1 to be complete in itself, while leaving room for more, a balance that few horror franchises achieve. The themes. What FNAF 1 is really about beyond the jump scares and survival horror mechanics. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 engages with themes that give the game its lasting resonance. These themes, woven through the gameplay and lore, elevate FNAF from a simple horror game to something with genuine emotional and philosophical depth. The most obvious theme is childhood innocence violated. The murdered children, their spirits trapped in machines designed to entertain kids, represent the ultimate betrayal of trust. They came to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza expecting fun and safety. They followed the golden rabbit because it looked friendly, because it was part of the magic. Their deaths corrupted not just their own existence, but the very concept of the family entertainment center, transforming a place of joy into a tomb. Related to this is the theme of corporate negligence and cover-ups. Fazbear Entertainment knew something was wrong. They knew about the murders, the health violations, the danger their employees faced, but they covered up, minimized, and continued operating because profit mattered more than safety. The newspaper clippings describe a company more concerned with reputation than lives. Phone Guy's cheerful dismissal of obvious dangers reflects institutional gaslighting, the practice of making employees doubt their own reasonable concerns. The game also explores the theme of being trapped, both literally and metaphorically. The murdered children are trapped in the animatronics, unable to move on, unable to communicate properly, stuck in a loop of confusion and violence. Mike Schmidt is trapped in the office, unable to leave until 6 a.m., surrounded by threats he can barely contain. Phone Guy was trapped by his job, continuing to work at a deadly location until it killed him. Even William Afton, the architect of the horror, would eventually be trapped in a springlock suit for 30 years. Guilt and responsibility run through the narrative. Michael Afton, if he is Mike Schmidt, carries guilt for his role in his brother's death and his father's crimes. The children carry guilt-adjacent confusion, attacking adults who might be innocent because they can't clearly remember who hurt them. The puppet, Charlotte's spirit, carries the burden of trying to help other murdered children, giving them life of a sort while knowing it's a cursed existence. The power mechanic ties into themes of scarcity and survival in an uncaring system. Mike has limited resources to survive the night, just as low-wage workers have limited resources to survive in economic systems that don't value their lives. The company provides just enough for the job to be theoretically possible, but not enough for real safety. This mirrors real-world labor exploitation, where workers face dangerous conditions for minimal compensation. Finally, there's the theme of things returning, of the past refusing to stay buried. William Afton thought he could hide the bodies and move on. The company thought they could cover up the incidents and continue operating. But the spirits remained. The evidence leaked through in odors and fluids. The truth kept surfacing in newspaper clippings and rumors. FNAF 1 suggests that some crimes are too terrible to truly conceal, that some victims refuse to be forgotten, that haunting is a form of justice, however twisted. Conclusion. FNAF 1's place in gaming history. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 released in August 2014 as the creation of a single developer working with limited tools and a modest budget. Within weeks, it became a phenomenon. Within months, it had spawned sequels, merchandise, fan games, and a dedicated community that would continue analyzing its lore for years to come. Within a decade, it would become one of the most influential horror games ever made, inspiring countless imitators and establishing Scott Cawthon as a major figure in indie gaming. The game's success came from multiple factors working together. The gameplay was simple enough to understand, but tense enough to create genuine fear. The visuals were uncanny, animatronics that looked almost friendly but clearly weren't. A restaurant that could have been real, but felt wrong. The lore was deep enough to reward investigation, but accessible enough that casual players could enjoy the surface story. And the jump scares, whatever criticism they might receive, were effective at creating moments of primal terror. But more than technical achievement, FNAF 1 succeeded because it told a story worth telling. The murdered children, the corrupt company, the night guard trying to survive. These elements connected to real fears and real concerns. Parents worried about their children's safety. Workers worried about exploitative employers. Everyone worried about trusting institutions that might not deserve trust. FNAF 1 took these anxieties and gave them form. made them manifest in animatronic shells and empty hallways. The game also pioneered a new approach to storytelling in games. Instead of cutscenes and dialogue trees, FNAF 1 delivered its narrative through environmental details, phone calls, newspaper clippings, and implications. Players had to piece together the story themselves, becoming investigators as well as survivors. This approach created engagement beyond mere gameplay, turning the community into collaborative detectives trying to solve the mystery Scott Cawthon had constructed. 10 years later, the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise continues. Games, books, a movie, expanded universes, all have grown from this single indie release. The story has become more complex, introducing new characters and locations, exploring the depths of William Afton's evil and the lengths his victims go to for justice. But it all started here, in that cramped security office, watching grainy camera feeds and praying for dawn. For those of us who experienced FNAF 1 when it was new, there's a special quality to its horror. It was unknown then, unexplained, a mystery that hadn't been solved. We didn't know who killed the children or why. We didn't know who possessed which animatronic. We didn't know the full scope of the tragedy. That uncertainty made the fear sharper, the discoveries more meaningful. For those coming to FNAF 1 now, with the benefit of everything that followed, the game offers a different experience. It's a historical document, the foundation of a franchise, the beginning of a story that would span decades in fictional time and years in real development. Understanding FNAF 1 means understanding where everything started, what the original vision was, how Scott Cawthon built something from simple tools that would capture imaginations worldwide. The animatronics still stand on their stage, waiting for closing time. The cameras still flicker with grainy feeds. The power still drains as midnight turns to dawn. And somewhere in that building, 5 children still wander, confused and angry, searching for something they can barely remember, attacking anyone who might be the man in the golden rabbit suit who ended their lives. That's the story of Five Nights at Freddy's 1, a story of murdered children and haunted machines, of corporate negligence and individual survival, of crimes buried but never forgotten, of spirits that refuse to rest. It's a story that began in 1983 with the Bite of 83 and Charlotte's murder, that continued in 1985 with the missing children incident, that manifested in 1993 when Mike Schmidt took the night shift, and that echoes through everything the franchise has become. Whether you're here for the first time or returning to where it all began, the security office is waiting. The animatronics are ready. The night shift has started. 5 nights. That's all it takes to understand why Freddy Fazbear's Pizza should have stayed closed. 5 nights to learn that some places hold on to their horrors. 5 nights to discover that when children die scared and angry, they don't always stay dead. Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, where fantasy and fun come to life, and sometimes where life comes to something else entirely. If you enjoyed this journey through FNAF 1's lore, consider liking and subscribing to Night Mode Lore. We'll continue exploring the darker corners of gaming's most fascinating mysteries, one relaxing deep dive at a time. Leave a comment letting us know where you're listening from and what aspect of FNAF lore you'd like us to explore next. Until then, rest well, and remember, the night shift ends at 6 a.m. You just have to survive until then. Good night.